So welcome to this talk about punk pedagogies in practice, it's a book as well as a concept. The book title changed from when I submitted to present this talk from Punk Pedagogies in Practice to Routledge, our publisher, changed the title to Punk Pedagogies: Music, Culture and Learning, with no Oxford comma, because we're English. So they did ask. So the book is co-edited with these two, I'm going to call them gentlemen for the sake of argument, Tom Parkinson and Mike Dines. Mike Dines is the founder, one of the founders of the Punk Scholars Network, and we each have Punk Scholars Network t-shirts, which I nearly wore today. So Tom and Mike would be presenting with me here today, but are not, so it's our book, not mine. And I'm going to read you some parts from the preface to our book and the introduction, which say the things that they would have said. So I feel like if I read the text that we've written, then that's speaking on their behalf better than winging it on my own. So here we go. Punk and pedagogy might seem like an odd, even contradictory choice of terms to share the title of a book. Punk is far easier to pronounce. Is the second G in pedagogy meant to be hard or soft? And almost everyone knows what they think punk means or denotes. Punk has enjoyed mainstream media attention, and as such has various familiar characteristics and associated stereotypes, whereas pedagogy has the air of a more specialist concept. Punk conjures, depending on who is doing the conjuring, music, rebellion, filth, anarchy, disrespect, criticality, disruption, noise, graffiti, an aesthetic, an ethos, a political or apolitical stance, particular times and places, and culture. Pedagogy is a less familiar word to many, albeit one that, once explained, everyone understands from their own experiences of it. We hope that it might be beguiling enough a term to attract readers who already understand the rest of the book's title and who, in traditional punk fashion, want to find out for themselves what it means. If someone picks this book off a library shelf or impulse buys it online, just to find out what it's about, that would exemplify a key tenet of punk pedagogy, the punk pedagogy of punk pedagogy, maybe. Pedagogy is about teaching and learning. It covers all the stuff that goes on in learning environments, usually classroom contexts in school, colleges and universities. But thanks to scholarship and practice in community music contexts and the growth in understanding of informal learning practices internationally, pedagogy now arguably accounts for, however intangibly, temporarily or contingently this might be, what happens in a far broader range of contexts and situations of learning. So, while punk and pedagogy might at first glance appear to share very little, they in fact are both diverse sites of tradition, innovation and tension, and can each be understood to comprise both narrow and diverse practices and perspectives, hence the plural in the title of the book. The chapters are mostly rooted in authors' individual practices as punks, and consider how aspects of punk can inform teaching and learning. Since this is not a methods book, we provide no instructions on how to be a punk, or how to be a punk pedagogue. To do so would be antithetical to almost all interpretations of punk. Readers can hear in the pages the voices of the authors, all of whom either self-identify as punks, or have been identified by the editors as punks. This being said, very few of the contributors would fit one easy stereotype of punk, such as that perpetuated by, for instance, Hot Topic. The contributors look at punk through broadly three overlapping and mutually constituting frames, so music, aesthetics and ethos, or music, culture and learning, as per the title. While each of these frames or lenses informs the others, and to separate them seems somewhat artificial, the chapters emphasise these aspects of punk to varying degrees. We're not trying to claim or to construct punk as anything it isn't. Rather, our aim is to draw attention to the complex and multifaceted nature of what pedagogies could be when construed under the malleable, iconoclastic and evasive rubric of punk. So I'm going to read you a little bit more from the introduction to the book, which cites this book, which is, as it says, an exploration of punk philosophy. There's a book that came out in 1999 by Craig O'Hara called The Philosophy of Punk, and it caused a riot in traditional punk fashion, because punks say there can't be a philosophy of punk, and certainly not the philosophy of punk. So this is an exploration of punk philosophy which is broader. So anyway, punk has emphasised two political philosophies, libertarianism and anarchism, which, while adherents share some common beliefs, diverge to occupy opposing poles on the political ideological spectrum. Punk has often tended to lean more heavily to the left than to the right of that spectrum. As a nation whose founding philosophies emerged from radical European movements during the English Civil War, such as the Levellers and the French Revolution, the United States has long favoured and mythologized the self-made man, painting itself as a land of opportunity and entrepreneurial spirit. As such, the nation's identity is built on the decidedly punk philosophical premise of elevating above most other aspirations the importance of freedom, self-determinism, and the removal of rules. In a New York Post article on the morning following the presidential election in 2016, Kyle Smith suggested that the then president-elect Donald Trump was the punk rock president, epitomizing that American ideal for many. Trump built a property empire from scratch. He was a reality television star. He rose to be a presidential candidate and eventually the president of the United States by presenting himself as against the machine, despite pandering to big business and being a walking, talking advertisement for the self-serving, late capitalist neoliberal ideology. The aspects of punk that the author seemed therefore to be invoking were primarily those of a DIY and anti-establishment rhetoric, whilst ignoring and thereby challenging the prevalent, although by no means exclusively, anarchist and socialist ideologies that inform much of punk narrative and activism. One of the most notable features of Trump's brief political career has been the man's lack of clear orientation toward any points of an ideological compass. Trump could thus be seen to embody punk's contradictions and its inherent discomfort in articulating, or its inability to articulate, what it is that it stands for. As these authors note, punk seeks to avoid, the previous authors, Sophianos, Wright and Waterhouse, punk seems to avoid the limiting qualities of and subsequent laziness associated with ideology. This attitude of constant challenge and determination to disrupt is typical of that which is characterized as punk. Punk has, however, more often than not, channeled its disruptive tendencies in tandem with emancipatory aspirations for marginalized or silenced voices towards a social justice agenda. In this vein, Ivan Illich in the 1970s pointed to the need to change fundamentally the ways in which systemized compulsory education, schooling, as in his words, operates, because of the fundamental flaws in the assumptions schooling makes and how inequality is thus inscribed in the system. He urges that, rather than calling schooling temporarily unfeasible, we must recognize that schooling is, in principle, economically absurd, and that to attempt it is intellectually emasculating, socially polarizing, and destructive of the credibility of the political system that promotes it. He asserts, moreover, that equal opportunity is, indeed, both a desirable and a feasible goal, but to equate this with obligatory schooling is to confuse salvation with the church. School has become the worldwide religion of the modernized proletariat and makes futile promises of salvation to the poor of the technological age, says Ivan Illich. Authors in this book mostly work in higher education, and as such, we have vested interests in perpetuating existing systems of education, compulsory and otherwise. We are perhaps thus reticent to embrace so self-destructive an agenda as to seek the total dismantlement of education systems. So through the frame of punk pedagogies, though, we seek to explore possibilities to effect change. This is the likely cover of the book, just been accepted by Routledge, I think. So that was designed by Russ Besley, another member of the Punk Pedagogies Network. He's a design punk, and he's a sort of a part-time musician, but thinks of himself more as a designer. He's both. So just a brief overview of the contents of the book. Russ Besley talks about the relationship between punk and design pedagogy. Nassim Niknafs provides an account of a Tehran music scene and an emerging punk learning in that scene. David Villadieguez reflects on his experiences of graduate school in the US. Warwick Harnias is the kind of outlier right-wing punk in the book. He charts a personal and moral spiritual journey beginning in Hong Kong and looks at entrepreneurship. And we nearly had a fight among the editors. We were in different countries at the time, so fortunately it didn't come to physical violence. But there was the idea of entrepreneurship is kind of antithetical to the whole lefty anarchist punk thing, but also definitely part of a more right-wing view of punk, so it's not going to be what it is, which is exciting. So what Warwick's chapter is in the book. Marcus O'Dare and Zukaila Bevan recount a do-it-yourself ethos in a delivery of a project in an undergraduate program. And we have John Duggan from Middle Tennessee University talking about the history of punk rock course that he taught. Rylan Kafara is talking about another history of punk rock, but this is a community learning program in Canada. Jessica Schwartz and Scott Robertson from LA talk about a pedagogy of comedic dissidence, which is about hip-hop and punk and how they're funny, and we can learn from that. Laura Way talks about zines and using zines, fanzines to learn in the classroom. Alexis Callio considers the potential of punk in democratic school music education. Tom Parkinson in his chapter looks at how different various university academics describing themselves as punks articulate and use that in their work. I talk about my own personal journey as a punk, and in the final chapter, which for my money is the best one, Tiago Santos and Paula Guerra from Portugal use critical pedagogy and anarchist pedagogy to kind of define what punk pedagogies could be, theoretically and in practice. So that's punk pedagogies. Thank you.